The late afternoon sun in Meriwether County was the color of old honey, thick and heavy in the air. It poured through the pine trees lining County Road 42, dappling the asphalt with long, shifting shadows. In his patrol car, Deputy Carl Riggs let out a slow breath, the kind meant to push the day's frustrations out. It didn't work. The morning had started with a chewing out from the sheriff about an overdue report. Then there was the snide comment from the dispatcher, a woman he'd once dated, about his expanding waistline. Now he was stuck on what he called taxpayer babysitting duty, a slow, mind-numbing patrol of the back roads, waiting for something, anything. To break the monotony, his fingers tapped an impatient rhythm on the steering wheel. He was a man built for action, or at least his version of it. Broad in the shoulders, with a face that had settled into a permanent state of mild irritation. Riggs had spent 20 years on the force. He knew every dirt road, every troubled family, and every shortcut. He also knew which people, in his view, usually meant trouble. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, just past the old Miller Bridge, a sleek, dark sedan was pulled halfway onto the narrow gravel shoulder. The car's hood was up, a universal sign of distress. Leaning against the driver's side door, arms crossed, was a man. Riggs's eyes narrowed as he slowed the cruiser. The man was black, dressed in a suit that looked expensive even from a distance. A charcoal gray jacket was slung over the open car door, and the man's white shirt was still crisp despite the humidity. He stood with an unsettling stillness, not pacing or looking worried, just watching the road. A flare of instant hot suspicion ignited in Riggs's gut. This was all wrong. A guy in a suit like that didn't belong out here. He should have been calling a tow truck or a friend, not just standing around like he was waiting for a bus. And that car, it was nice. Too nice for this part of the county. Riggs's mind, trained by years of cynicism and a particular kind of bias, began filling in the blanks. Stolen car. Con man. Drug runner moving product in a fancy disguise. He pulled the cruiser in behind the sedan, the tires crunching on the gravel. He took his time, deliberately adjusting his belt, his hat, making his presence known. He watched the man in the rearview mirror. The man didn't jump, didn't start fumbling for papers. He just turned his head, watched the patrol car, and then turned back to look at the road ahead. That calmness felt like a challenge. Riggs swung his door open and stepped out, his boots hitting the gravel with authority. "Afternoon," he called out, his voice not friendly, just official. The man turned to face him fully. He was tall, with a composed, thoughtful face. He looked to be in his late 30s. "Afternoon, officer," he said. His voice was even, polite, but lacking the nervous tremor Riggs was used to hearing. "Car trouble?" Riggs asked, stopping a few feet away, his thumbs hooked in his belt. "Seems to be," the man said. "Just died on me. No cough, no sputter. All the electronics just went dark. That right?" Riggs said, not really listening. He was studying the man, the suit, the car. "License and registration, please." "Of course," the man said. He moved smoothly, leaning into the car to retrieve a slim wallet from his jacket. He handed over a driver's license and a registration card. Riggs took them, his eyes scanning. The license said the man's name was from Atlanta. The registration matched the car. Everything was in order. But the feeling wouldn't leave him. It was too neat. A guy from the city, dressed for a boardroom, broken down in the middle of nowhere? It itched at him. "What brings you all the way out here, mister?" Riggs let the question hang, looking at the license again, as if he'd forgotten the name already. "Just enjoying a drive," the man said, a faint, polite smile on his lips. "Took a wrong turn, I think." Then the car gave out. A drive. In a full suit. Riggs handed the documents back. "Pop the trunk for me, would you?" The man's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes. A slight cooling. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Procedure," Riggs said, the word a blunt instrument. "When we find a vehicle stranded, we do a quick check. For safety." For a long second, the man just looked at him. The air between them seemed to grow still. Then, without a word, he reached into the car, pulled a lever. The trunk lid popped open with a soft click. Riggs walked to the back of the car. The trunk was almost shockingly empty. A small, expensive-looking overnight bag. A roadside emergency kit, still sealed in plastic. A jacket. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing illegal. The pristine emptiness felt like another insult. He slammed the trunk shut harder than necessary and walked back. The man was watching him, that same infuriating calm on his face. "Everything in order?" The man asked. The polite tone now felt like mockery to Riggs. This man wasn't scared. He wasn't respectful. He was assessing him. Like Riggs was a minor inconvenience, a puzzle to be solved. The day's frustrations, the sheriff, the dispatcher, the boredom boiled over. Finding a perfect target. "Step away from the vehicle for me," Riggs said, his voice dropping, losing its false officiality. "Officer? You heard me. Step away. Put your hands on the roof of the car." The man's posture straightened. The pleasant mask vanished. "On what grounds?" "You've seen my license. The car is registered to me. I've complied with your request." "I'm not asking," Riggs said, taking a step closer, invading the man's space. He could smell the faint, clean scent of the man's soap. "I am giving you a lawful order. Hands on the car. Now." The man didn't move. His gaze was level, unwavering. "You have no probable cause. I am a citizen with a broken-down vehicle. You are escalating a situation without justification." The words were like a match to gasoline. Justification. This man was quoting law at him? On his road? In his county? Justification? Riggs snarled. "How about obstructing an officer? How about failing to comply?" His hand went to the butt of his service weapon, a gesture meant to intimidate. The man's eyes flicked to the hand, then back to Riggs's face. He saw the move for what it was, a threat, not a prelude to action. And in that moment, he made a decision. He took a small, deliberate step back, away from the car, putting more space between them. A de-escalating move, but to Riggs, it was a retreat. He saw the step back as a sign of weakness, finally. He pressed his advantage. "I said, hands on the car." He shoved the man hard in the chest with both hands. The man stumbled back a step, his dress shoes slipping on the loose gravel. He caught his balance, and when he looked up, his face was different. The pretense of the polite, stranded motorist was completely gone. What was left was a cold, focused intensity. There was no fear in his eyes, only a sharp, calculating anger. "That was a mistake," the man said, his voice low and dangerously quiet. The words hung in the air. For a heartbeat, Riggs felt a strange, icy trickle in his veins. This wasn't the reaction he expected. This wasn't submission. It was a warning, and that warning, that sheer audacity, shattered the last of Riggs's control. The red haze descended. This man needed to be shown. He needed to be taught his place. Without another word, Riggs turned and stalked back to his patrol car. He yanked open the rear door, leaned in, and pulled out not his baton, not his taser, but a single golf club and 9-iron he kept for crowd control, as he jokingly called it. It was heavy, familiar in his grip. He turned back. The man was still standing there, watching him approach. He didn't run. He didn't plead. He just watched, his body coiled but still. "Last chance," Riggs spat, hefting the club. "On the ground." The man said nothing. His eyes were fixed on Riggs's, and in them Riggs saw a silent, damning verdict. Riggs swung Dot. It wasn't a wild swing. It was practiced, brutal, and aimed with cruel precision. The metal head of the club connected with the side of the man's left knee with a sickening, muffled thwack. Dot. The man let out a sharp, explosive grunt of pain. His leg buckled instantly, and he went down hard on the gravel, catching himself on his hands. He gasped, his body curling involuntarily around the injury. Riggs stood over him, breathing heavily, the club still in his hand. He waited for the sobs, the cries, the apologies. They didn't come. The man slowly, painfully, pushed himself up onto his elbows. His face was pale, tight with agony, sweat beading on his forehead. But his eyes, when they found Riggs's, were clear and dry. They burned with a pure, undiluted fury. He looked from Riggs's face to the golf club, then back again, as if memorizing every detail. Through clenched teeth, each word weighted with pain and a promise. The man spoke. "You have no idea," he hissed, the sound barely more than a whisper. "What you have just done." The words should have sounded melodramatic, but in the quiet of the pine-scented evening, with the man's unwavering gaze locked on him, they felt like a curse. A chill, completely separate from the humid air, traced Riggs's spine. He shoved the feeling down. He had won. The challenge was broken. "Get up," he barked, his voice rough to cover his own unease. "You're under arrest." As he roughly hauled the limping, silent man toward the back of his cruiser, Riggs felt a surge of vindication. He'd shown him. He'd put him in his place. He glanced in the rearview mirror at his prisoner, who was staring straight ahead, his jaw set, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was just another arrogant fool who thought he was above the law. By the time Riggs pulled back onto the asphalt, headed for the county lockup, he had almost convinced himself it was true. Almost the echo of those final words, "What you have just done." The county lockup wasn't a big place. It smelled of old bleach, stale coffee, and something deeper, a sour tang of fear and sweat that no amount of cleaning could scrub away. Deputy Riggs marched his prisoner through the buzzing fluorescent lights of the booking area, his hand clamped firmly on the man's arm just above the elbow. The man walked with a severe, stiff-legged limp, each step clearly a shot of pain, but he didn't make a sound. Sergeant Dawes, a tired-looking man with a gray mustache, looked up from his paperwork at the front desk. His eyebrows lifted slightly at the sight of the man in the ruined, dusty suit. "Evening, Carl," Dawes said, his voice flat. "What have we got?" "Obstruction, resisting, assault on an officer," Riggs recited, the words coming out practiced and easy. He gave the man a slight shove toward the booking counter. "Wouldn't comply with lawful orders." "Got mouthy." The man from the road said nothing. He just stood there, leaning his weight on his good leg, his eyes taking in the room, the scuffed linoleum, the faded wanted posters, the old clock on the wall, with the same detached calm he'd shown on the roadside. It was getting under Riggs's skin all over again. Dawes sighed, a sound of pure routine. "All right. Empty your pockets onto the counter. Everything you got." Slowly, moving with deliberate care, because of the cuffs and his injured leg, the man complied. He had to twist awkwardly to get his wallet from his back pocket. He placed it on the counter. Then, from his front pants pocket, he pulled out a set of car keys, a few coins, a handkerchief, and a single, plain black metal card. It was about the size of a credit card, but thicker, with no writing, no numbers, just a smooth, dark surface. He laid it down with the rest. Riggs picked up the wallet first, flipping it open. The driver's license was there, the same one from the road. A few $100s in cash. 2 other normal-looking credit cards. Nothing special. He tossed it back on the counter dismissively. His eyes fell on the black card. "What's this?" Riggs asked, picking it up. It was cold and surprisingly heavy. "Access card," the man said, his voice quiet but clear. "Access to what? Some fancy gym?" Riggs sneered, turning it over in his fingers. There were no markings at all. The man didn't answer. He just watched him. Riggs felt a fresh flicker of irritation. "I asked you a question." Before the man could respond, if he even intended to, Sergeant Dawes reached out. "Let me see that, Carl." Riggs handed it over. Dawes held it up to the light, squinting. He ran his thumb over the edge. Then, very faintly, they both heard it, a tiny, almost inaudible hum, and a thin blue LED light glowed for a second along one seam, before winking out. Dawes's face changed. The tiredness vanished, replaced by a sudden, deep wariness. He put the card down very carefully, as if it were hot. "Process him," Dawes said to Riggs, but his eyes were on the card. "Do the prints and the photo. I'll be right back." He picked up the strange card and walked quickly toward his office, closing the door behind him. Riggs stared after him, confused. What was the old man getting so spooked about? It was just a weird piece of metal. Shaking his head, he turned back to his prisoner. "All right, genius. Let's get your fingerprints. Maybe we'll find out who you really are." The process was mechanical. He guided the man to the digital fingerprint scanner. The man offered his hands without resistance. Riggs pressed the first index finger onto the glass plate. The machine beeped, the print appearing on the screen. He moved to the next finger. Then the machine beeped again, but this time it was a different sound, a sharper, urgent tone. The screen, which usually showed a simple print accepted message, flashed red. Words scrolled across it in bold black letters. "Federal flag, contact supervisor." Riggs blinked. He'd seen wants or warrants pop up before. Never this. He cleared his throat. "Must be a glitch," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. He tried the next finger dot, same sharp beep. Same red screen. "Federal flag, contact supervisor." A cold knot began to tighten in Riggs's stomach. He looked at the man. The man was looking back at him, and in his eyes was no surprise. Only a quiet, expectant certainty. Like he was watching a play he'd seen before. The door to Sergeant Dawes's office burst open. Dawes came out, but he wasn't alone. Two men followed him. They were both in dark, well-cut suits that looked utterly out of place in the shabby booking area. They weren't big men, but they carried themselves with a stillness that filled the room. The older one had short, steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The younger one was clean-shaven, his expression neutral, like a closed door. All the color had drained from Dawes's face. "Deputy Riggs," he said, his voice strained. "These gentlemen are from the Justice Department. They need to speak with you. Now, in my office." The two suits didn't even glance at the prisoner. Their focus was entirely on Riggs. The older one gave a small, curt nod toward the office. The knot in Riggs's stomach turned to ice. "Sarge, I'm in the middle of processing a... Now, Carl?" Dawes's voice held a note of pure, undiluted fear. Riggs's mouth went dry. He looked from Dawes to the stone-faced men, and back to his prisoner. The man gave him the faintest, most minute shrug, as if to say, "I tried to tell you." Leaving the man standing by the fingerprint machine, Riggs walked toward the office, his boots suddenly feeling heavy. The two suits followed him in, and the older one closed the door with a soft, final click. The office was small and cramped. Dawes remained standing, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. The two suits didn't sit either. "Deputy Riggs," the older one began. He didn't offer a hand, didn't give a name. His voice was calm, low, and carried an immense unspoken weight. The individual you have in custody. You assaulted him with a golf club. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered without emotion. Riggs's heart hammered against his ribs. He was resisting a lawful. The man held up a hand, a simple gesture that silenced Riggs instantly. The man you struck, he continued, as if Riggs hadn't spoken, is a federal agent. A senior operative with the Office of Special Investigations at the Department of Justice. He was operating under a deep, non-official cover. The operation he was involved with concerns multi-state public corruption and organized crime syndicates. It has been active for 22 months. The words hit Riggs like physical blows. Asterisk federal agent. Deep cover. Organized crime. Asterisk, they swirled in his head, not making sense, then making a terrible, horrifying sense all at once. The suit, the comb, the strange card, the fingerprint flag. You broke his cover, the younger suit said, speaking for the first time. His voice was cooler, sharper. You assaulted a federal officer in the performance of his duties. You have potentially compromised an investigation that has taken years to build and endangered the lives of multiple confidential informants. You have, Deputy, created a catastrophic situation. Riggs felt the room tilt. He grabbed the edge of Dawes's desk to steady himself. I didn't know, he choked out. He didn't identify himself. He was just some guy on the road, acting suspicious. That some guy, the older one said, his eyes like chips of flint, was tailing a primary target when his vehicle was disabled. He was waiting for an extraction. Your intervention and your violence has now placed that target on alert. Millions of dollars and thousands of man-hours are now at risk because you decided to play golf. The sheer, colossal scale of what he'd done began to crash down on Riggs. This wasn't about a shouting match or a bruised knee. This was about something vast and shadowy, a world he'd only seen in movies. And he'd just kicked a hole right through the middle of it. What? What happens now? Riggs whispered. Now, the older suit said, you are suspended from duty, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge, your service weapon, and all department credentials. You are not to speak to anyone about this incident, not your colleagues, not your family, no one. You will be contacted. Do you understand? Riggs could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. The younger suit stepped forward, holding out a plain manila envelope. Your sidearm and badge, please, now. With numb, clumsy fingers, Riggs unclipped his badge from his belt. It felt heavier than it ever had. He placed it in the envelope. He drew his gun, cleared it with practiced, automatic movements, and placed it inside too. The finality of the click, as the suit sealed the envelope flap, sounded like a cell door slamming. Go home, Deputy, the older man said. Wait. They left the office then, the two suits moving with a quiet, efficient purpose. Riggs stood there, staring at the empty space where they had been. Sergeant Dawes finally sank into his chair, looking 10 years older. Carl, Dawes said quietly, not with anger, but with a kind of exhausted pity. What in God's name did you do out there? Out in the booking area, Riggs could see through the glass window. The two suits were now flanking the man from the road. One of them was speaking to him in a low voice. The man nodded, then looked directly through the glass at Riggs. He held his gaze for a long, long moment. There was no triumph in his face. No anger anymore. Just a profound, weary assessment, like a mechanic looking at a totaled car. Then they turned and led him away, not toward the cells, but out the secure rear exit. He walked with his head high, the suits slightly behind him, not as captors, but as escorts. Riggs stood in the silent, buzzing office, the ghost of the golf club's weight still in his hand. the cold, heavy truth settling into his bones. He was no longer. The silence in his own truck was a heavy, smothering thing. Riggs drove the familiar backroads toward his house, but nothing looked the same. The pine trees were just dark shapes, the mailboxes just markers along a path to a life that felt like it had already ended. His hand kept drifting to his belt, feeling for the weight of the badge that wasn't there, the solid press of the gun that was gone. The word suspended played on a loop in his head. It sounded temporary, like a timeout. But the looks on the faces of those men from the Justice Department, the way Sergeant Dawes couldn't even meet his eyes, it wasn't temporary. That was the end of the road. He pulled into the gravel driveway of his small ranch-style house. The porch light was on, a yellow beacon he usually found comforting. Tonight, it felt like it was shining on a stranger's home. He sat in the truck for a long time, the engine off, listening to the ticks and creaks of the cooling metal. He needed a story, something to tell his wife. The thought of explaining it, of saying the words out loud, made his stomach clench. He finally went inside. She was in the living room, watching TV. She looked over, saw his face, and muted the television. "You're home early," she said, a question in her voice. "Long day," he grunted, heading straight for the kitchen. He pulled a beer from the fridge, twisted the cap off, and took a long swallow. He could feel her watching him from the doorway. "Carl?" "What is it?" "Nothing. Just paperwork mess. Got sent home." He couldn't look at her. He stared at the label on the beer bottle, peeling at the corner with his thumb. "Sent home? It's not even 8. She came closer. "You took off your gun." That's when he knew he couldn't hide it. "Not all of it. I'm on admin leave," he said, the term tasting like ash. "Pending an investigation." "For what?" Her voice was sharp now, worried. He shook his head, a tight, frustrated motion. "A traffic stop. Guy got mouthy. It escalated. They're just covering their backs, you know how it is." He forced himself to meet her eyes, to sell the lie. He saw the fear in them, and the doubt, but also a desperate need to believe him. She wanted it to be just another bump in the road, a headache they could get past. He spent the rest of the evening in a fog, jumping at every car that passed on the road, his phone feeling like a live wire in his pocket. He waited for the call, the summons. It didn't come. The waiting was worse. The next morning, he woke up with the sun, his body still on patrol schedule. He put on jeans and a t-shirt. It felt wrong. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the backyard. The normal world was moving on. The neighbor was leaving for work. A dog was barking somewhere. His own life was frozen. Around 10, his phone finally rang. It wasn't a number he recognized. His hand was slick with sweat as he answered. "Deputy Riggs?" It was a professional, neutral voice. "And man, please turn on your local news channel. Now." The line went dead. With a trembling hand, he fumbled for the remote and clicked on the small TV in the living room. He found the regional news affiliate. A blonde reporter was standing in front of a generic government building, but the graphic at the bottom of the screen made the blood drain from his face. Asterisk, asterisk. Breaking. Federal agent assaulted by local deputy asterisk, asterisk. Shocking details emerging this morning, the reporter was saying, her face grave. Sources within the Justice Department confirmed that a senior federal agent, working undercover on a major organized crime task force, was violently assaulted and arrested by a Meriwether County deputy during what is being described as a routine traffic stop gone terribly wrong. The agent, whose identity is being protected, was allegedly beaten with a non-standard weapon, believed to be a golf club, and suffered significant injuries. Riggs's breath caught in his throat. They knew about the club. How did they know? The screen changed to a video, shaky, taken from someone's phone. It showed the back of his own uniform, the cruiser, and a man on the ground near a dark sedan. It was filmed from a distance, through trees, but it was unmistakably him, standing over the figure. The video was silent, but the story it told was screamingly loud. The graphic changed. Asterisk, asterisk, Ragu cop. Investigation widens. Asterisk, asterisk, then the screen split. The reporter was now next to a photograph, his own department photo, the one in his uniform, looking stern and official. Underneath it, the caption, Deputy Carl RIGGS suspended. He felt sick. They'd leaked it. Those suits had fed the story to the news, and they'd given them his name and picture. They were shaping the narrative, and they were making him the lone wolf, the bad apple. The phone rang again, shrill and terrifying. It was his old friend, another deputy. He didn't answer. It rang again. A cousin. Then a number from the sheriff's office. He silenced the phone and threw it onto the couch like it was on fire. The television kept talking. They were interviewing a policy expert now, discussing the abuse of power and racial profiling. They didn't say the words, but they hung in the air, heavy and implied. They were connecting dots for the whole world to see, and the picture they were drawing was of him. He was alone. Completely alone. The department would cut him loose to save itself. His buddies, the ones he'd had beers with, who'd backed him up in 100 scrapes, they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. His world, the only world he'd known for 20 years, had just collapsed in less than 24 hours. Asterisk, 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 across town. In a private hospital room that was more like a secure office. The man from the road sat propped up in bed. His leg, tightly wrapped and braced, was elevated. The pain was a constant, deep throbbing. But his mind was clear, sharper than ever. His supervisor, a wiry man with a neatly trimmed beard who looked more like a professor than a government agent, sat in a chair by the window. A laptop was open on his knees. The surgery went well, the supervisor said. You'll walk just fine. Run eventually. But the cover is completely burned. We've pulled the team back. The primary target is spooked. He's gone to ground. The man in the bed nodded slowly. He was thinking about the deputy's face in that final second, before the swing of the club. It wasn't just anger he'd seen. It was a pattern. A habit of cruelty. The deputy, he said, his voice calm. What do we have on him? The supervisor tapped a few keys and turned the laptop around. On the screen was a file of life laid bare in cold text. Carl Riggs, 22 years on the force. A stack of civilian complaints a mile high. Most were dismissed internally. Shoving matches, verbal abuse, threats. A pattern of stops in certain neighborhoods. He's got a reputation. Anything stick? Nothing criminal. Until now. The supervisor scrolled. But his finances are interesting. He bought a new bass boat last year. Cash. His wife drives a pretty nice SUV. On a deputy's salary? Possible, but tight. And look at this. He pointed to a section of the report. He's listed as a security consultant for a company called Southern Star Logistics. It's a shell. The paper trail is a mess, but it funnels back to a man we've had eyes on for a while. The man in the bed leaned forward, interested. Who? Alice Thorne. Local businessman. Car dealerships, some land development. Pillar of the community. Also, we suspect, the primary money launderer and fixer for the network we were tracking. The one you were tailing when your car died. A slow, understanding smile touched the injured man's lips. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has just seen a new trail open up. So the deputy who attacked me is on the payroll of the man I was investigating. Seems that way. Small, unofficial retainers. cash bonuses around the holidays, looking the other way on truck inspections at Thorne's warehouses, petty corruption, the kind that makes a man feel invincible. The man stared out the window at the clear blue sky. His operation was in ruins. A year of meticulous work, down the drain because of one violent, stupid man on a back road. But maybe not. He looked back at his supervisor. Riggs is drowning. He knows he's facing federal time for assaulting me. His world has just been blown up on national news. He's scared. And he's connected to Thorne. The supervisor saw where he was going. You're thinking of flipping him. He's a rotten fence post, the man said. But sometimes you can push a rotten post over to knock down the whole fence. He doesn't have to be a good man. He just has to be a desperate one. He settled back against the pillows, his mind already working, plotting a new course. The pain in his leg was just a detail now. The deputy had tried to break him with a golf club. Now, he would use the deputy as a lever to break something much, much bigger. The game wasn't over. It had just changed. And Carl Riggs, sitting terrified in his dark living room, had no idea he was about to become a player. 3 days passed. They were the longest days of Carl Riggs's life. The house, once his refuge, felt like a prison. The phone had stopped ringing. The news had moved on to fresher scandals, but the damage was done. He could feel the silence from his old life like a physical pressure. His wife moved through the rooms quietly, her face etched with a confusion that was turning into a hard, cold fear. She'd seen the news. She knew his paperwork mess story was a lie, but she didn't ask again. The space between them grew wider with every silent meal. He jumped at every sound. The mailman's footsteps on the porch, the rumble of a delivery truck, each one felt like it could be the beginning of the end. He was waiting for the hammer to fall, for the squad cars to swarm his house, for the FBI to come crashing through the door and drag him away in cuffs. The image played over and over in his mind. When the knock finally came, it wasn't a crash. It was a firm, deliberate rap on the front door, mid-morning on the 4th day. It was so ordinary, so quiet, it was somehow worse. Riggs peered through the blinds. A black sedan was parked at the curb. Standing on his porch was the younger of the 2 suits from the station. Alone, he wasn't smiling, but he didn't look angry either. He just looked official. Riggs's heart tried to climb out of his throat. He opened the door. "Deputy Riggs," the man said, his voice neutral. "We need to talk. Somewhere private." Riggs just nodded, his tongue thick in his mouth. He stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. He followed the suit to the sedan. The back door opened. "In here," the man said. It wasn't a request. Riggs ducked into the back seat. The suit got in the front passenger seat. The driver, an older man Riggs didn't recognize, pulled away from the curb smoothly. They drove in silence. They weren't heading to the station. They weren't heading to a courthouse. They drove to a bland brick office building on the edge of the county seat, the kind of place that housed dentists and insurance agents. They parked in the underground garage and took an elevator to the 4th floor. The room they led him into was empty except for a table and 3 chairs. The walls were bare, off-white. A large mirror took up one wall. An observation window. Riggs knew what that meant. He was led to a chair facing the mirror and told to sit. The younger suit sat across from him. The driver left, closing the door with a soft, airtight click. For a full minute, the suit just looked at him. He didn't open a folder. He didn't turn on a recorder. He just let the silence stretch until it was a taut wire in the room. "My name is Agent Ruiz," the suit finally said. "I work with the agent you assaulted." Riggs flinched at the word. Assaulted. It sounded so clinical, so final. Let's not waste time, Ruiz continued, his eyes flat and unblinking. You are in a hole so deep you can't see daylight. Federal assault on a covered operative. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Compromising a national security adjacent investigation. We have the club. We have the medical report. We have witness testimony from your own sergeant about your state that night. We have the video. This is a slam-dunk federal prosecution. You are looking at 25 years to life in a place where ex-cops don't fare well. Each sentence was a nail, hammered into the coffin of Riggs's future. He felt dizzy. The room seemed to get smaller. I didn't know who he was, Riggs whispered, the defense sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Ignorance is not a defense, Ruiz said, not unkindly, but with utter finality. You swung the club. You made the choice. That choice has consequences. Your life, as you know it, is over. Your pension is gone. Your house will be gone, paying for lawyers who can't help you. Your family will be gone. You will die in prison. That is the path you are on. Riggs dropped his head into his hands. The despair was a black, heavy wave, pulling him under. This was it. This was the hammer dot. Then Ruiz spoke again, his voice lowering a fraction. But there might be another path. A narrow one. Riggs's head snapped up. Hope, cruel and desperate, flared in his chest. It's not about you being a good man, Ruiz said, as if reading his mind. We know you're not. We've seen your file. The complaints. The suspicious cash bonuses. The cozy relationship with Ellis Thorne's businesses. Hearing Thorne's name come from this man's mouth was like a second shock. It froze Riggs solid. We know about Southern Star Logistics, Ruiz went on, his voice a quiet, relentless drill. We know about the consulting fees that showed up right before you bought that boat. We know which of Thorne's trucks never got inspected, which warehouses never had a surprise visit. You're a small, corrupt fish in a very dirty pond. Riggs couldn't breathe. They knew everything. All the little compromises, the corners he'd cut, the envelopes of cash he'd told himself, or just gifts between friends. They had it all. Thorne, Ruiz said, leaning forward slightly, is a person of significant interest to us. He's not just a businessman. He's a facilitator. He moves money. He arranges meetings. He makes problems disappear for the kind of people we've been trying to put away for years. The operation my partner was running? Thorne was a key piece of it. He let that sink in. Riggs's mind was reeling, trying to connect the dots. His friend Ellis, the backslapping, generous Ellis, was the target of those federal agents? You are uniquely positioned, Ruiz said. You have his trust. He thinks you're on his payroll. And right now, he's nervous. He knows a federal agent was grabbed in his county. He might be wondering what that agent was doing here. He might be waiting to see if you talk. Ruiz paused, letting the weight of the situation press down on Riggs. So here is the choice. Option 1. You go to trial. You lose. You die in prison. Thorne laughs and finds another deputy to buy. Riggs swallowed hard. Option 2, Ruiz said, his gaze locking onto Riggs's. You work for us. You wear a wire. You go back to Ellis Thorne. You act normal. You tell him you're being squeezed by the feds over the traffic stop, that you're scared, that you need his advice. And you get him to talk. About his business. About his clients. About the people he works for. You help us build a case that puts him, and the people above him, away for a very long time. Riggs stared at him, horrified. You want me to spy on Ellis? To record him? He'll kill me if he finds out. He'll own the prison block you die on if you don't, Ruiz replied, his voice cold as stone. This is your one and only chance for a different ending. You cooperate fully, you provide substantiated, usable intelligence that leads to major convictions, and the U.S. attorney will consider that at your sentencing. You might not walk away free, but you could see the outside of a fence again before you're an old man. Your wife might still recognize you. The offer wasn't freedom. It was a different kind of prison, but it was a prison with a window, however small. I can't, Riggs stammered. He's not stupid. He'll know. He'll know you're scared, Ruse countered. And you will be scared. That's what will make it real. You're a cornered animal. It's the most natural thing in the world for you to run to the only ally you think you have left. That's your script. You just have to live it. Ruiz stood up. He placed a single plain white business card on the table. There was only a phone number on it. You have 24 hours to think about it. You call that number if you choose to work. If you don't call, Ruiz shrugged, a small, empty gesture, then we proceed with your prosecution. The offer vanishes. Forever. He walked to the door and opened it. The message was clear. The meeting was over. Riggs sat alone in the silent, bright room, staring at his distorted reflection in the one-way mirror. He saw a tired, frightened man in a flannel shirt. He wasn't a deputy anymore. He was a pawn. A piece to be moved across a board he barely understood. On one side was the certain destruction of a federal prison. On the other was the terrifying, unknown danger of betraying a powerful, dangerous man. He reached out a shaking hand and picked up the card. The numbers seemed to burn into his skin. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash. And he knew, with a sick, sinking certainty, that he was going to have to take it. The car was a plain, dark sedan, but it didn't feel like his patrol car. Nothing felt like his anymore. Sitting in the passenger seat, Carl Riggs felt like a man wearing a costume of his own skin. The clothes were his polo shirt, some khakis, but they itched. A tiny, sensitive microphone was taped to the center of his chest, the wire snaking around his ribs to a recorder strapped to the small of his back. It felt huge, like everyone could see the lump under his shirt. Agent Ruiz was driving. He hadn't said much since Riggs had made the call, his voice a dry croak, 23 hours after he'd been given the card. Now, they were parked a block away from the back entrance of the Pine Grove Grill, the kind of restaurant Ellis Thorne liked for meetings. Dark wood, thick steaks, booths where you couldn't be overheard. Remember, Ruiz said, his eyes on the rearview mirror, not on Riggs. You're not acting. You are scared. You are in over your head. You need your friend Ellis to throw you a rope. Let him feel smart. Let him feel in control. Riggs just nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. He could feel the cold sweat at the base of his spine, right where the recorder was. He kept picturing Ellis's face if he found out. That easy, smiling face hardening into something else. Something Riggs had heard about, but never seen directed at him. Your only job is to get him talking about his operation, Ruiz continued, his voice a low monotone. The shipments, the clients, the money. Don't force it. Just steer the conversation. He'll want to know about the agent. Use that. In the back seat, another man spoke. We'll be listening. If you're in genuine danger, say the phrase, I really need a drink. We'll come in. Riggs glanced back. It was the other suit, the older one from the lockup. He gave a curt nod. There was no reassurance in it. They were sending a lamb into a pen, and they were just here to see if the wolf took the bait. Riggs got out of the car. The afternoon sun was warm, but he felt cold. Every step toward the restaurant's door felt like walking the plank. He pushed it open. The familiar smell of grilled meat and old coffee hit him. And there, in the usual corner booth, was Ellis Thorne. Ellis was a big man, but it was a comfortable bigness. He wore an open-collared shirt, a gold chain glinting against his chest. He saw Riggs, and his face broke into a wide, welcoming smile. "Carl, over here, buddy." "Get over here." The smile almost broke Riggs. It was so normal, so friendly. He forced his own lips up, feeling the muscles in his face scream in protest. He slid into the booth opposite Ellis. "You look like hell warmed over," Ellis said, chuckling. He signaled the waitress for 2 coffees. "Heard you got yourself into a little mess." The words were light, but Riggs saw the sharp curiosity in Ellis's eyes. The news had reached him. Of course it had. "It's bad, Ellis," Riggs said, and he didn't have to fake the tremor in his voice. "It's real bad. It wasn't just some guy. It was a federal agent, undercover." Ellis's eyebrows shot up. The waitress came, set down the coffees, and left. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "A Fed? Here? What was he doing?" "I don't know. They won't tell me anything. Just that I messed up some big investigation. These Justice Department guys." Riggs shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "They've got me by the throat. They took my badge, my gun. They're talking about prison, Ellis, for assaulting a federal officer. Decades." He let the fear pour out, raw and real. He watched Ellis's face. The friendliness was still there, but it was now layered with calculation. He was thinking, working it through. "That's a raw deal, Carl. A real raw deal," Ellis said, sipping his coffee. "But a good lawyer can—" "They've got video," Riggs interrupted, the desperation in his voice genuine. "They've got the club. They've got everything. It's not about lawyers. They're offering me a way out, but—" He trailed off, looking around the nearly empty restaurant as if the walls had ears. "They did? But what?" Ellis's voice was careful now. "They want information," Riggs whispered, leaning in. "They're asking about local business, about people who might be moving things under the radar. They're squeezing me, Ellis. They think because I'm a deputy, I know things." Ellis Thor went very still. The friendly mask slipped for just a second, and Riggs saw the cold, flinty intelligence underneath. This was the man who had built an empire on knowing which palms to grease and which problems to make disappear. "What did you tell them?" he asked, each word precise. "Nothing. I told them nothing," Riggs said, his hands up. "But they keep asking. About trucks, about warehouses, about you." There, he'd said it. He watched Ellis's eyes. They didn't widen in surprise. They just narrowed, like a predator focusing. "Me? Why would they ask about me?" Ellis's voice was a soft, dangerous rumble. "I don't know. Maybe because we're friends. Maybe they looked at my finances, saw the consulting work. I don't know what they're digging for, Ellis, but I'm scared. I need to know what to do. If they come at you with questions, what do I say? What can I say?" He was babbling, but it was the right kind of babbling. The plea of a drowning man to the only strong swimmer he knew. He was handing Ellis the control Ruiz had told him to. Ellis leaned back, studying him. The silence stretched. Riggs could hear the blood pounding in his own ears. He was sure the microphone was picking it up. Finally, Ellis let out a long, slow breath. "All right, Carl. All right, take it easy." He sounded like a man calming a spooked horse. "First thing is, you don't know anything. Because there's nothing to know. My businesses are clean. Boring even. You did some security consulting for a holding company of mine. Perfectly legal. You have no idea about my clients or my shipments because there's nothing illegal to know. You understand?" Riggs nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. "These feds," Ellis continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "they're like bulldogs. They get a scent. They never let go. But if there's no bone, they eventually get bored and leave. The problem is, they're using you as the scent. They think they can scare you into making up a bone. But what if they don't get bored? Riggs asked, his voice cracking. Ellis's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a cold, transactional thing. Then we make sure they're looking in the wrong yard. You stick to the story. You know nothing. And if they press you, you come to me. We'll handle it. We've handled things before, haven't we? It was a reference to all the little favors, the overlooked violations. A reminder of the debt. Yeah, Riggs breathed. Yeah, we have. Good, Ellis said, his tone final. He pulled out his wallet, threw a couple bills on the table for the coffee. You hang tight, Carl. Lay low. This will blow over. I'll make some calls. See if I can't get some pressure taken off you from other directions. He stood up, clapped a heavy hand on Riggs's shoulder. It felt like the weight of a tombstone. You did right coming to me. Remember, we look out for our own. Then he was gone, walking out of the restaurant with his easy, confident stride. Riggs sat frozen in the booth. The words echoed in his head. Asterisk will handle it. Other directions. Asterisk, it wasn't a confession, not outright. But it was a map. It was the sound of a man who was used to fixing problems, who had resources and other directions to call upon. For the federal agents listening, it would be a starting point. A thread to pull. He didn't feel relieved. He felt emptier than ever. He had just betrayed the only person who had offered him a hand, even if that hand was dirty. He had become exactly what Ruiz said he was, a tool. A frightened, desperate tool. He got up, his legs shaky, and walked back out into the sun. The black sedan was still there. As he approached, the back door opened. He slid in. Sitting in the back seat now, his legs stretched out on the bench, was the man from the road. The agent. He looked paler, tired, but his eyes were the same clear, focused, and utterly in control. He held a small earpiece in one hand. He had heard everything. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other. The deputy who had swung the club. The agent who had taken the blow. The air in the car was thick with everything that had happened. Finally, the agent spoke. His voice was quiet, but it filled the space. The man you met on the road is gone, deputy, he said. There was no anger in it. Just a simple, undeniable fact. You work for me now. He paused, letting the new reality settle over Riggs like a shroud. Your redemption, the agent said, his gaze never wavering, if there is any, starts here. The car pulled out into the traffic, leaving the restaurant behind. Riggs looked out the window, but he didn't see the town he'd known all his life. He saw a battlefield, and he was no longer the deputy on patrol. He was something else entirely. The game had begun, and he was the piece in play. There was no going back.